the sequence of events that transpired after approximately 3 p.m. to when he went into the water, that's what remains a mystery.
A 4th of July beach celebration darkens when 18-year-old Nolan Wells vanishes.
If you're going out towards Horn Island, I need you to keep your eyes out for 18-year-old Nolan Wells.
His body washes up days later and brings with it question after question.
Why did this kid leave them the cell phone if that's what actually happened?
But it's clear that there's been a significant period of time between the boat leaving, the last time Nolan was seen, and this boat getting back to his original owner.
What we've been told does not make sense.
Now, the family and the world are demanding answers.
And we're talking about the Deep South. We're talking about a very charged political time. We're talking about one black kid with several white kids. There is a scenario under which there could potentially be something to hide.
Here's everything we know so far, a complete timeline in the death of Nolan Wells. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. The 4th of July is supposed to be a time to celebrate with family and friends. This year, being America's 250th, was an even bigger celebration. I mean, it's an excuse to go out and grill, have some summer drinks, maybe even hit the beach. And that's exactly what 18-year-old Nolan Wells and his friends did. Head off to a small little island off the coast of Mississippi. And by all accounts, it started out as a fun day. Nolan even reportedly had his eyes on a girl at one point. Some young, fun summer love. But you're watching Scandal. And that means that's not where our story ends. That's only where it begins. With it, a mystery that we still don't have answers for. Why exactly did Nolan Wells separate from his friends? Did he drown? Was there foul play? Why would he leave his cell phone and keys with his friends? And would this investigation be treated any differently had Nolan Wells been white? We're going through all of those questions and more, giving you a complete timeline up to the point of this recording. So let's begin with who Nolan was. He was born on August 19th, 2007, making him only 18 years old at the time of his death. He grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. It's a coastal town east of Biloxi. He graduated high school there just last year in 2025 and started college at Southwest Mississippi Community College in the fall, where he played receiver on the football team. His coach, Les George, told People magazine, quote, "Nolan was a genuine person. You come across people in life that are just salt of the earth, the kind who want to see the good in everyone and make other people feel good and accepted. That's who Nolan was." On July 4th, Nolan decided to celebrate the holiday with some friends, visiting Horn Island off the coast of Mississippi in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's the National Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, Brian Trasher.
So Horn Island, like I said, it's probably about 10, 12 miles off the coast of, it stretches probably from about the south of the city of Biloxi to the city of Pascagoula, which borders Harrison and Jackson counties on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's a very popular recreational destination. It is uninhabited. There's some very pretty beaches. You know, when it's not too windy, the water's pretty clear. The temperature was in the high 70s. It's 4th of July. Obviously, it's a crowded day. Everybody out. But yeah, the only way to get there is to by boat or maybe presumably like an aircraft or something. But for the most part, people go out there by boat and just leisurely hang out in the water and have fun. Same thing with Ship Island. Ship Island is just to the west, and that island has a historic Fort Massachusetts, that's been there since 1861. Another popular place for people to hang out. All the barrier islands along Mississippi on the weekend, you see just a lot of boats. Sort of like the Outer Banks of the Carolinas. It's just a popular recreational destination.
According to The Guardian, Nolan went out on a boat with 3 of his friends headed for Horn Island. They reportedly arrived right around 11:15 a.m. on July 4th. So they hung out on the island for a couple of hours, did 4th of July and beachy things until it was time to leave. And here's where the story gets complicated. According to GPS data, the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. But what led up to this incident is confusing.
So the story which was told to me was that at approximately 3 p.m., his friend group that he had gone to the island with decided they were going to leave. They had to get back. And Nolan had started talking to I was told it was a young female, but he was talking to some other people, had decided that, hey, I'm going to hang back. I can get a ride back with somebody else. Um, he hangs out with this group all the time. They've been to this island together a bunch of times. It probably at the time didn't seem like a big deal to his friends to say, okay, you want to, go holler at that girl, and if she'll give you a ride back, then that's cool. We'll see you when we get home. That's the way it was explained to me.
Some reports say just that the three friends decided to head back on the boat and that Nolan decided he wanted to stay back and talk to a girl who was named Katie. In that version of events, Nolan planned to hitch a ride back to the mainland with some other friends. And some of this can be attributed to a statement from Judge Ashley Cole, the mother of one of the guys who left on that boat. She released a statement, and it reads in part, quote, "My son saw Nolan last around 3 p.m. on July 4th. They left around 4:30 p.m. when the boat was taking on water and they had an issue with the bilge pump. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island and return inland later with another group of friends." And there is an emergency recording coming from the boat showing that it was in fact taking on water.
We're sinking. Can you all please come?
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
According to CBS News, the boat had to be towed back to the shore where it arrived at 6:06 p.m. on July 4th. It was then taken to its original port, but later moved to the Fort Bayou boat launch where it arrived at 7:19 p.m. And that means there were several hours between when Nolan was last seen and when the boat ended up docked on the mainland. And this little fact stands out to a lot of people, including criminal defense attorney Tyler Bailey.
That if he was last seen on the island at 3 p.m. and they apparently not only did they leave there, go to another area, then go to dock and get towed, there's a lot that could have transpired between that time, especially putting that in conjunction with the text messages and Snapchat history that was allegedly deleted from his phone or missing from his phone. So there's a lot of time for people to get their stories straight, to talk to maybe counsel or others about what needs to be the narrative when they arrive. Now, I'm speculating to a lot of this because we don't know. There has been no interrogation of these individuals. There's been no official statements that have been issued, but it's clear that there's been a significant period of time between the boat leaving, the last time Nolan was seen, and this boat getting back to his original owner.
And we'll talk more about this as the episode goes on, the possibility that not everyone is telling the truth or that the investigation wasn't handled the way it should have been. And that leads into the first point of conflicting information. So the first report says Nolan stayed behind to talk to this girl named Katie. But according to Nolan's family, the girl on the island, again, sometimes identified as Katie, said Nolan told her he was leaving the island to get back on his friend's boat. Here's retired detective Matt Irvine.
Well, there's a couple of things seem to be going on here. One, there has been a lot of speculation and a lot of misinformation in this case. Sounds like from what we're hearing, that image from the pool party, even though it didn't come out till the weekend of July 4th, was actually taken a week or so earlier. There is some question with that recording about who is arguing with who about wanting their phone back. The friend said it's him and not Nolan Wells. So there is just a lot of speculation and misinformation out there. And then, as to the statements from the people on the island, you'd really need to dig down to see exactly what they said. It sounds like the friends told law enforcement that Nolan Wells wanted to stay behind to talk with some young woman. Sounds like the young woman said he left her to go back to get on the boat with his friends. That's not necessarily a conflicting statement, right? Both things could be true. If she didn't actually see him get on the boat, that doesn't necessarily mean that he made it back there, and something might have happened along the way. So you'd really have to look at the exact words that folks used in describing what they thought happened. And it's not unusual in a case like this for different people to have different perspectives and for those to appear to be in conflict.
Nolan's family says it was unlike him to just separate from his friends. His mom told Good Morning America, quote, "That we cannot answer. I can't fathom why he would." His dad said, quote, "We always told him, if you go out with a group, you stay with a group." But regardless of what circumstances led to Nolan and his friends being separated, They were. And here's where the next weird part comes in. Nolan's phone and keys somehow reportedly ended up with his friends. According to the Associated Press, Nolan's parents actually tracked his phone on the evening of July 4th. They used the Life 360 app, and they found the phone with one of Nolan's friends, but Nolan was still missing. And that's something that civil rights attorney Joe Richardson just can't make sense of.
So, but did he leave the other group of friends his cell phone? If that's true, what they reported is that somehow they showed up, the group of friends that left him showed up with his cell phone. Now, they say it's a pretty remote place and there's not a lot of service out there. I don't know how well your cell service works or whatever, but it seems like to me, I'd keep my cell phone. If I have a 19-year-old kid, whether I thought it was going to work or not, it wouldn't occur to me to leave. So that's the biggest question right now. It's actually it's circumstantial evidence. If that, it's not DNA, it's nothing like that. Why did this kid leave them the cell phone if that's what actually happened? I wasn't there. So it leads to some very interesting questions.
And once again, things get even weirder. When Nolan's mom got a hold of the phone, she reportedly noticed a bunch of things had been deleted from it. We're talking photos, videos, even recent Snapchat posts. So did all of this information just get deleted? And is there a way to potentially retrieve it?
So there are experts and there are programs that are designed to extract data from cell phones. There's a couple of programs that are used to recover data, including data that people think is deleted. So there's a lot that you can get from a cell phone. Some of it is dependent upon the phone itself, how data is stored, the choices you make, for example, with an application like Snapchat, whether things are retained or deleted. But there are people who do nothing but cell phone forensics and forensic examination of electronic devices, and they're very good at it, and they're very good at recovering things that people think that they got rid of. In addition to whatever's on the device itself, there may be additional information on the servers of social media companies and providers of telecommunication services. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned there, both from Mr. Wells's phone and from the devices of other people that were there on the island at the time.
As the sun set on July 4th and the hours ticked by, Nolan's family still hadn't heard from him. At about midnight on July 5th, Nolan's mother officially reported him missing, and the search began immediately. People online sounded the alarm, urging beachgoers and residents across the area to keep an eye out for Nolan.
5 July 2026, really important. I know you guys are going to be out on the boat today. Enjoy your day. If you're going out towards Horn Island, I need you to keep your eyes out for 18-year-old Nolan Wells. Black young man, about 6'1", 180 pounds, was last seen on that north end of Horn Island. Guys, he hasn't been found. Okay, he was last talking to a girl on that north end. He went out to Horn Island with some buddies yesterday out on a boat. He's not been heard from in close to 24 hours. So guys, if you're out there fishing, if you're out there, jet skiing, doing whatever you guys are doing, keep your eyes out for Nolan. Family's going to be out there in the boat searching. We're going to try and get some air assets up there. We know there's surface assets around. Coast Guard's been notified. Local police have been notified. Guys, please keep your eyes out. Look at the poster, look at the pictures. Let's see what we can do. Let's find this young boy. His mother's worried sick. Let's do what we do, guys.
Right away, the team from the United Cajun Navy was on the case.
On Sunday, the 5th of July, we had a rescue specialist and a drone operator go out on a boat, and they spent several hours out there on the island and around the island, and they were not successful in finding any clues. So that's when we decided to do aerial reconnaissance.
Ryan himself was in the air when he noticed something strange the following day on July 6th.
I went up in a single engine fixed wing aircraft and flew basically a grid around Horn Island, Ship Island, which are barrier islands just south of Biloxi and Pascagoula, Mississippi, down to Chandelier Islands, which is actually part of Louisiana, but just due south of those barrier islands, and looking for any kind of activity. And then as we flew over the northwest tip of Horn Island, going back north, we noticed there was a couple of boats beached up on the beach that were not there before. And I could look down and I could see that something was going on. And then we made a circle around. By that time, a lot more law enforcement boats were showing up. And before you know it, they had, probably a dozen boats huddled up on the beach there. So we knew that they were setting up a command center.
And that's when the devastating news broke. A body had been recovered.
I can tell you that I've started flying over the island, that part of the island where the body washed up. approximately 6:30 a.m. and I believe he was spotted by a park ranger at 8:45. My belief is that he just washed up within that time period because we were flying kind of a long grid north and south, and I think he just washed up, and park ranger just doing his normal runs in the morning. But also, too, given the situation, I'm sure they were a little more hyper aware and probably a little more head on a swivel on the island, knowing what happened and what was going on. But yeah, I was told that it was about 8:45 when a ranger spotted, called it in, because I did see a long line of emergency boats coming in to coming north. I'm sorry, heading southwest toward the northwest tip of the island. And I thought it was just originally, I thought it was just another search party going out, but I think they were actually responding to that call.
At first, it was just a body. It hadn't officially been identified as Nolan.
I saw the body from about 300 feet in the air, but so I wouldn't be able to tell you like exact condition. I can tell you that it did not appear to be waterlogged. It was only in the water for a couple days. But nevertheless, the sheriff's office put out a statement saying that they had no reason to believe it was not Nolan. So I think they were pretty confident it was. I think the reason for the delay in the official announcement is that I don't think the coroner can sign the death certificate until he gets DNA evidence proving it is who they're, the person they're saying is deceased, is actually them. So I think it's just a formality.
But it was quickly confirmed the body belonged to Nolan Wells. His mother took to Facebook writing, "I want to thank our family, friends, community, United Cajun Navy, local law enforcement, and everyone involved for all the love, support, resources over the last few days. His father, our family, friends, and I are absolutely devastated. My heart heartbroken for my sweet son, who is always willing to cheer and uplift others. Nolan was a special soul. God took his time creating our son. I ask that you please give me and my family time to grieve." His college also released a statement, reading in part, quote, "The entire Southwest family is heartbroken as we mourn the tragic loss of Nolan Wells. Nolan was an exemplary student, athlete, friend, and teammate. We remember Nolan as a well-respected young man who was very popular among friends, faculty, and staff. We loved Nolan, and he will be greatly missed in many ways. Our continued prayer will be with the Wells family now and in the days to come." And at this point, in any logical case, a death investigation would begin. But according to the Jackson County coroner, there were no obvious signs of trauma on Nolan's body. The coroner told CNN, quote, "No foul play was suspected."
Unfortunately, I think an early statement from the sheriff's office, something along the lines of, "We don't see any foul play here. We don't suspect foul play." That's a premature statement. And I think that unfortunately suggested to some people that they were rushing to judgment.
The big issue here is that the early announcement of no foul play, the evidence of the cell phone that the family received, I believe, a couple of days after Nolan went missing, or the night of, I can't recall the exact time, and then the missing of text messages and Snapchat data. And by allowing joint experts or joint data extraction at the same time, it's going to help the family feel comfortable knowing that all data is being looked at, is not being piecemeal. Because oftentimes I've seen cases where there's been a cell phone data that's been extracted and the state says, "Oh, well, that's other information deleted. We can't get it." But that's not normal. When you could, a forensic expert can see what's been deleted, what's been altered in the data.
On July 7th, an official autopsy was conducted. At the time of this interview, we're still waiting for those results. And in the meantime, a lot of people have a lot of questions.
I think the toxicology report is going to be telling as well, because if you're in the water and you have some alcohol in your system, it may be more difficult to swim and things of that nature. So the toxicology report is going to be very important, and more information regarding the autopsy about his actual how he actually unfortunately lost his life is going to be relevant for both sides, whether the state sees this as evidence of there being foul play or the family family sees it as more so evidence of the state not doing a thorough investigation and being willing to pursue charges.
And all this brings up even more questions about how Nolan's death investigation has been handled. So much so that the family retained renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump.
Ben Crump, he's nationally known. I've seen him in San Bernardino down the street from me. But where people got to know him on a national standpoint is in Florida, where he's from. But he's got connections to the South, of course, deep connections to the South, went to school in the South, has handled cases in Mississippi, etc. So it would make sense that Ben Crump or somebody like him would be able to press buttons right away and start to ask the right questions and to pull on the right resources, make the right calls in terms of understanding what's out of sorts about an investigation. So it's not only trying to get at what we believe may be the truth or whatever we can know about it, but is anything being done differently than how it would normally be done? So he brings to the table all of those types of things.
We have the honor and the privilege of helping to lead an independent investigation on behalf of the family of Nolan Wells.
Even renowned Reverend Al Sharpton spoke at the press conference.
It is clear that this situation must have the most thorough and objective investigation to lead to justice.
Together with Nolan's family, they announced an independent investigation with funding from some major players such as Tyler Perry, Spike Lee, and Colin Kaepernick to cover funeral costs and a second autopsy.
It's not unusual to have more than one autopsy in a case, and it's not unusual for medical professionals to disagree, any more than it'd be unusual for scientists or other eminent professionals to disagree about how to interpret facts in a case.
I think they're looking both ways before they cross the street. One of the biggest pieces of evidence is the body. Not to sound morbid or whatever, but there's a chance that if a drowning is being alleged and there's trauma that's inconsistent with the drowning, then we know that that raises more questions and that creates more problems. There's also an argument that perhaps the state of Mississippi, depending on what may have happened, depending on what they suspect may have happened, that they can't necessarily prove one way or the other, they may be incentivized to close the book. I've dealt with cases where you're trying to uncover information and you're dealing with a coroner or you're dealing with investigators, fire investigators, et cetera, fill in the blank. When something fits a narrative and they put it away, they do that. We would love to say, oh, we'll leave no stone unturned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not always the case. So what's the best way to be sure that you've uncovered all of the information you possibly can? I think it's because you do, and that's why you need to do an independent autopsy, so that there is a scenario under which, and we're talking about the Deep South, we're talking about a very charged political time, we're talking about one black kid with several white kids. There is a scenario under which there could potentially be something to hide, and someone may choose sides in that regard. But the body itself, theoretically, could at least allay some concerns about how one may have died, et cetera. And it might be said that you certainly get information quicker.
Not only has Crump's team started work on a second independent autopsy, they've also gotten some major movement from the Jackson County District Attorney's Office.
We've just had an opportunity to meet with District Attorney Angel McElgrath and some members of her team. We had a very respectful meeting. She shared with the family that there will be a grand jury that she will turn this case over to once they have collected all the information and finished their investigation.
Crump also announced that whenever Nolan's phone is reviewed, his experts will also be present alongside the family. That way, everyone will get all the same information at the same time.
This DA said that she commonly meets with families who have lost loved ones. That's one thing that she did say. But out of this, where you have a sheriff that said there's no foul play initially, and then you have the family demand an independent investigation, and then you have a meeting between the family and along with the family's lawyer. That is very significant. I think that shows that the public pressure and the national attention to this area of Mississippi has made the DA change some of the way she's addressing this by meeting with the victim's family and even coming to the extent of doing some joint things together with the victim's family and their attorney. That's not common in situations like this.
So, a lot to unpack here. Let's begin with the grand jury of it all. Now, this is a secret proceeding, so there won't be cameras. We won't know exactly when it's happening, but we can make an educated guess about it all.
Grand jury proceedings are secretive. So there will be, for example, no media coverage of the grand jury. There's no defense lawyers are not allowed to be there. The victim's family attorney, Ben Crump, won't be able to be there. It'll be a prosecutor who's presenting the case to the grand jury that's been impaneled. If they decline to press charges, there will ultimately be questions. People may wonder whether this grand jury was spoon-fed information that would lead them to come to a conclusion of there being no probable cause for an arrest. But I do believe if they do find that there's criminal charges out of the materials that are presented to them, it would affirm some of those suspicions that so many people have about how this has been handled and all the gaps that appear to be present in this investigation in the aftermath of Nolan's death.
Now, prosecutors have their own discretion. They don't have to file charges based on what comes out of these grand jury proceedings, but it is possible that criminal charges could be filed.
Right. Anything that's a criminal charge pertaining to the disappearance and the death of this young man here could be a criminal charge. It could be obstruction of justice. All right. You could have some accessories after the fact. We don't know if it's going to be homicide or murder, but there could be some criminal charge that could come out of this. And I think that's all the family has been asking for is a fair investigation so they can know the truth.
And that's why we're all here. The truth, because there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And that leads to my next point, the video. Now, this clip emerged after Nolan's disappearance, showing what appears to be a fight on Horn Island before Nolan went missing. And this caused a lot of waves. Was there some sort of altercation ahead of his disappearance? Well, yes and no. If you believe Nolan's friend Trayston Shepard, who spoke to Good Morning America, saying, quote, Nolan wasn't on the island at the time. Instead, this was allegedly a fight with a complete stranger and had nothing to do with Nolan. Now, that video is in the hands of investigators.
I imagine they're looking at it very carefully. I imagine they're doing everything they can, both visually and in terms of audio, to enhance it and determine who's talking. And I imagine that is just a very small slice of the electronic evidence that they're looking at in this case. I mean, if you have a bunch of young people taking a trip to an island, I imagine everybody's got phones, everybody's recording and uploading things to social media. And even if Mr. Wells's social media account was apparently quiet during at least some of this time, some of that interaction has got to have been captured by other people. That's just sort of how young people socialize. Everything gets put online.
Trayston also cleared the air about why Nolan's friends ended up with his phone. They told GMA, quote, all our friends are out there. Who are we communicating with? And we're in salt water. We're not in fresh water. When Nolan got in the water, he put his phone on the boat along with probably 15 other phones.
Normally, young people have their phones with them and on all the time, but I think getting in water would be an exception. You're not going to get in the water with your phone in your pocket. So the idea that he would leave it behind with somebody or on a boat if he's going to be getting wet makes a lot of sense.
And we mentioned Trayston spoke out, and also, so did Ashley Cole, the Jackson County judge. And I read part of her statement before, but I wanted to touch on it again. She's released multiple statements. The first saying in part, quote, our family, along with the community, grieves the loss of Nolan Wells. Our thoughts and prayers are with Nolan's family. Our son Warren loves Nolan dearly. Unfortunately, I feel that it is appropriate for our family to dispel some rumors with facts based upon the social media attention that is being diverted away from the Wells family and their loss. No one in our family is trying in any way to impede with the investigation by law enforcement or to otherwise hamper the family and law enforcement quests for answers. Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully.
Judges often go out of their way not to make public statements because they're judges. And it is interesting that she's making this statement. And I will give you 10-1. Jackson County is probably a small enough place, figuratively, if not literally, where I will give you 10-1 that she knows, or the prosecutor, she knows the prosecutor knows her. She knows the investigating agency, or the investigating agency knows her. And she knows the coroner's agency, or the coroner's agency knows her. So when you put all of that together, and I'm the family of this deceased, that doesn't necessarily put me at ease. I think there's two things that you can agree with right now between those families and those parents. I don't believe either of them wanted the son dead. Okay. And I believe that they both understand that the judge doesn't want her kid to go to jail either. So all of this is going on, which makes transparency related to the investigation all the more important. And even though she framed it as something that would divert attention back to the family, she's talking about the family's grief. She's not talking about the family's justice. So there's a difference there in terms of what it is that's happening. How you see things depends on from where you sit. And I don't think she had to put her toe in the water at all. She decided to, but I think that says a lot as well, potentially.
Along with this, Ashley shared several screenshots of alleged death threats to her son and others following Nolan's death.
For anybody, your viewers, we need to try to keep the chatter and the conspiracy theories to a minimum. We do need to find out what happened to Nolan from 3:00 until he was last seen. His family has a right to know exactly what happened and how he met his final moments. But there's his friends, who he's been friends with since he was a little kid, are getting death threats from people who are accusing him of horrible things. And right now, we don't know anything. We have to let law enforcement do their job and come out with the facts. And that's what we're asking the public to do.
According to People magazine, as recently as Thursday, the FBI began investigating these death threats. A spokesperson released a statement saying, in part, "From day one, we have been supporting Jackson County as they've worked to gather information and find answers for the Wells family and the community. The FBI will remain ready to assist JCSO investigators as they request our support, particularly when federal resources may expand their capacity to provide clarity and peace of mind for Nolan's loved ones." And that's really where we are right now, waiting on the first initial autopsy results, later the toxicology, and later still the independent autopsy results. Really, we're just at the start of the investigation.
Well, I would expect that the forensic examination of phones and other electronic media is likely to take weeks, could even take months, depending on the amount of data involved. And it also has to do with the amount of personnel that are available to review all that data. That could be in itself very time consuming. The autopsy itself, at least the preliminary autopsy, both the official one and the private one commissioned by the family, should be complete or close to complete now or very soon. But there's additional steps, like looking at toxicology, for example, that may take, again, additional weeks. So that's going to take a while. I think that probably additional potential witnesses may be identified besides the group of friends that went to the island with Mr. Wells. Those interviews may take additional days and weeks. They're probably going to be re-interviews as they gain information from one person that requires them to go back and clarify or confirm information with somebody they've already talked to. So I think we're probably talking about a matter of weeks. Both for the Jackson County Sheriff's investigation and hopefully for the independent investigation sought by the family and by Mr. Crump. So I'm hoping it's not going to be too much longer than that. The tough thing about a case like this is sometimes even after all the information is in, you don't have a clear answer. I mean, for example, if the determination is that he drowned, well, that's a cause of death. It's not a manner of death, right? You could drown accidentally. You could drown by suicide, you could drown by homicide. So we might, at the end of the day, have all the facts in and still not have an answer that satisfies the grieving family or other people that are concerned about what happened.
Wow, I mean, there's a lot to take in with this case. So many facts, the timeline, the information, a lot going on. But there is one person who's been following this really since the start, and that's Law and Crime's very own Jesse Weber, host of Sidebar, joining us today on Scandal. Jesse, thank you for coming back on. It's so great to see you.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. I think this is a case that needs a lot of attention, and I think it's also really, really confusing, and there's a lot of like back and forth and misinformation, so I'm happy to come on and talk about what I seem to know at this point.
And you are the person who I wanted to talk to most for this, because this has obviously been going on since 4th of July. It's now mid-July, believe it or not. There's been updates, and I've been watching all the sidebars, following along. So let's wind back the clock. Start with your first coverage of it. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on this case?
Look, it's a really upsetting, unfortunate case. Whatever the results tend to be, or whatever the investigation develops about why Nolan Wells died, it's a tragedy. 18 years old, athlete, college football player, beloved by his family, beloved by his friends, by the way, too. And it just seems, whatever the circumstances of why this happened, hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. But a young life was lost. He was just supposed to be out celebrating with friends before he goes back to school, before he goes back to football practice. And it's a really, really upsetting situation. And I have to tell you, I really feel terrible for the family, because this is not only a family that's trying to grapple with the idea of losing their loved one, losing their son, but they don't trust law enforcement. They felt the need to hire outside counsel, which is particularly devastating and particularly concerning. And they now have a spotlight on them and on this case in a very unique way.
I mean, when you think about the logistics of it all, I mean, he's 18, so he's legally an adult. But you and I, winding back our own clock, when we're 18, we feel like we're adults, but we're still kids, you know? And he was doing everything right, hanging out. I went to the beach on 4th of July. Everyone went to the beach on 4th of July, having a great time. And then for his parents and his family to have to go through and, as you said, grapple with all of this. Plus, there's the law enforcement of it all. So, okay, let's talk about the investigation and some of the details. For starters, it's odd to me, and I think to a lot of people, that his phone, his keys are with his friends. They're not with him. What are your thoughts on that?
You might say it's odd. You might say it's odd that if you take the narrative that he left the boat to go talk to some girl on Horn Island and follow her, why wouldn't he take his stuff with him? Now, his friend, Mr. Shepard, Trayston Shepard, spoke with ABC News and I think also Rolling Stone, and basically said, it's not unusual. You're going into salt water. You wouldn't take your phone with you. If you look, there's a million phones. All the friends' phones are all on the boat. And who else is he going to be communicating with? He's communicating with everybody there. Now, there are some who say, look, he's a teenager. How does he not have his phone with him 24/7? If he's talking to a girl that maybe he just met or wasn't that familiar with, wouldn't he want to get her number maybe? I don't know the circumstances of that. And by the way, she hasn't publicly come out. Ben Crump has indicated, who represents the family, that they have spoken with her, and she may give a kind of a different narrative about what their relationship was like or what their conversation was like. But I think the way to look at it is, yes, it's unusual. We understand that it was Nolan's family who was able to recover his phone using the Life 360 app, and that the phone was with his friends. So I think I get why there's confusion. I guess why there's suspicion about it. But I would also say, in that island, in that remote area, right, it's only accessible by boat. There's no commercial development. Is it unusual that if you're going on and off a boat that you wouldn't have your phone? But again, what's the end result? He didn't have his phone, and he apparently didn't come back with his friends on that boat, which is strange.
I mean, when you put it that way, I actually was thinking about this. Every summer, I do this girls' trip with my friends from college. We go to the lake. And I'm thinking about it. I leave my phone on the boat. It's not with me because I'm going to get it wet. I'm clumsy. I'm going to drop it in the water. All of us, we're hanging out with friends. We're talking to each other. We leave our boats we leave our phones on the boat. So when you point it out like that, okay, that kind of makes sense. But this next part doesn't make sense to me. The reports that I've seen that some of the messages or Snapchats or photos, things have been deleted. What can you tell me about that?
So I think that's not coming officially from law enforcement. That's coming from Nolan's family. Why they believe that, not entirely sure. But look what's happening. Ben Crump announced this week that he and law enforcement have agreed that there will be a mutual inspection of the phone, meaning the state's investigators and the family's own private investigators and experts will review the phone. And one of the interesting aspects about phone and digital data as a piece of evidence, it can be easily recovered. Whereas if, for example, you have let's say an article of clothing that the DNA could be compromised, fingerprints can be compromised. If someone deletes information off of a phone or off an app, You and I both know this as covering a million cases. That's not deleted forever, and there is evidence of something being removed or deleted, which in and of itself can be a key piece of evidence. So the fact that you're going to have two, mutual examinations of the phone, I think is going to be quite critical. Now, what is that going to lead to? I'm not entirely sure. Is anything on that phone going to provide a piece of evidence as to what actually happened to Nolan? Maybe, maybe not. I'm skeptical of that. But at the very least, this is a development that they at least have his phone, which we know in a number of different cases, particularly missing persons cases, sometimes you don't have that. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the phone shows.
Yeah, I mean, if something really was deleted from the phone, is that consciousness of guilt? Why would it have been deleted? What happened there? I mean, there's a lot of questions. And okay, we keep talking about this because that piece of information, you're right, came from Ben Crump, who obviously Nolan Wells' family has retained. They've been pretty outspoken. So let's talk about Ben Crump. I mean, he's a very famous name when it comes to this type of case. Why do you think they went and retained him or got in contact with him?
It's a great question. Ben Crump is a big name. He is a big name. He makes a lot of noise. He makes public statements. He brings attention to these cases. And if the goal for the family is to not only have a lawyer be a middle person or conduit to get information from law enforcement, but also to help retain experts and retain the services of an independent medical examiner, because we know that they're sending Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy. The value of a Ben Crump is it brings attention to this case. And if you do not believe that the Mississippi authorities are going to be thorough in this investigation, if there is a concern that they automatically jumped the gun and said, oh, there's no foul play, and they're going to wipe their hands and move forward from it, if you bring him in and he's like, wait a minute, no, I'm going to hold press conferences. Everybody's now talking about Nolan Wells. It puts more pressure on law enforcement to conduct a thorough investigation. It doesn't mean that they're going to be pressured to say that someone killed Nolan or someone was responsible for his death, but it's going to put pressure on them to make sure they are thorough and dedicate the appropriate resources, because this is a family that's hurting and this is a family that wants answers.
I mean, you're right. It has drawn attention. I mean, you've done how many sidebars on this case? There's article after article. People are talking about it at the very least. And I guess I wanted to ask you, too, about this second autopsy. So, of course, there's the official one that's conducted, through law enforcement, through the ME, I should say. And now this second one is being conducted, too. Now, the findings of this, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but let's say there is a criminal case here. The findings of this second autopsy, would they automatically be allowed in, or how would that even work?
So right now, in order to determine whether there's criminal charges, it all really depends what the state medical examiner is going to determine. If the state medical examiner looks at the body, and I think there could be a little bit of complications there, because we still don't even know where Nolan died or when, right? Did he die in the water? Did he die in a boat? Did he die on land? But even in those circumstances, if you're talking about a drowning, would his body be able to provide answers about whether he was held down, whether he was pushed into the water? Okay. If there's trauma, and I believe the sheriff has come out and said there was no obvious signs of homicidal trauma, it can be difficult to know exactly what happened to Nolan. But if there is something from the state medical examiner's investigation, their autopsy, that determines that he was killed, that there was foul play, that's when you see charges. Now, if they determine they don't see anything, and by the way, they're also waiting for toxicology results, which would be interesting as well. But if they don't determine anything, it would be the DA's prerogative to say, we don't think that there's a crime that's been committed. Whereas if the private investigation, the private autopsy determines, no, we found signs of trauma, those will obviously be presented to the DA's office, and they'll have to consider it. But you see, how many times do we cover cases, trials, where you have different medical examiners determining different, different conclusions as to cause and manner of death. So it does become a question, do they present this case to a grand jury? Do they want to move forward with charges? If there is a discrepancy, though, and that becomes public, that there's a discrepancy between the autopsies, this case isn't going anywhere anytime fast, and it's going to raise a lot more questions or put a lot more pressure on law enforcement.
Okay, I'm glad you put me in my place because I did jump ahead, and
Did you? I don't even know that. Did you? I don't even think you did.
You did. You're the one who's schooling me on this, and I'm glad for it, Jesse, because we got to talk about the grand jury. I kind of skipped right over that, and we got to talk about it. So recently, when Ben Crump and his team came out, they did a press conference. They said, "Okay, we met with the DA." That's when we reported on how everybody's going to be present when they're extracting information from the cell phone, etc. And it sounds like after that, things could be taken to a grand jury. And here's where things get kind of crazy, because it's not like we can live stream this. It's not like we're going to know the date, because grand jury proceedings are secretive, obviously. So what would all of that look like? I mean, do they even have to bring charges? I mean, the DA's office, if the grand jury says, yeah, I mean, like, give me your thoughts on the grand jury of it all.
So, assuming this is true, because I don't believe that the DA herself has come out and said this, but assuming this is true, and it wouldn't be unusual for something like this to happen. Remember, Ben Crump basically said that at the end of the sheriff's investigation, the DA's office will present it to a grand jury. They have no obligation to. They have to see if they believe there's probable cause that a crime was committed. If they choose to present it in front of a grand jury, which, as you said, is a secret proceeding, the standard is much lower. The grand juries are not coming back and trying to find that a crime was committed beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just whether or not there's sufficient probable cause. You just need a majority of jurors, not a unanimous jury. If they come back, it does become a question, what would the charges be? If I'm talking about the death of Nolan Wells and I'm talking about a grand jury, people say, oh my gosh, murder charge, manslaughter, negligent homicide. You could be right. Maybe. I mean, there could be different theories about who contributed to Nolan's death, if anyone, and what degree. But also, don't automatically assume that charges would be related to his death directly. There could be tampering with evidence. There could be lying to police. There could be a charge that's part of the investigation that's not directly related to Nolan's death. So, a couple things again. One, we'll see what the results of the sheriff's investigation are. We'll see if they present the case to a grand jury. It's not always indefinite that a grand jury would even return with an indictment. They always say, a grand jury will return an indictment against the ham sandwich because the standard's so low, but not always a guarantee. And if there are charges, don't automatically assume that it's just going to be a homicide-related charge. It could be something else as well.
That's a great point. I mean, we've talked about the cell phone. We've talked about potentially or reportedly, allegedly deleted messages. So there's a lot of different possibilities.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying anybody committed a crime. I'm not saying anybody deleted evidence or lied to police, but just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, totally. We just have to kind of keep our minds open for all of this. And that leads into my next question, too, is it was really interesting that early on, authorities came out and said there's no signs of foul play. I mean, they did say his body doesn't show any severe signs of trauma or anything that would stand out immediately. They said no foul play. And that kind of got the ball rolling where people are like, okay, is this investigation really being handled correctly? And now, obviously, we've talked about how the first autopsy, the second, the tox report, all of these things. What sort of info do we want to come out? Like, what are our questions that we want answered now?
So first of all, I think it's interesting that they made that statement. And I also think it's interesting, I think the governor came out recently, this week, first time commented on Nolan Wells and said, look, I don't have all the details. I don't know everything about it, but there's nothing I've seen that indicates foul play. I heard that clip first last night on News Nation. I talked about it in my sidebar show today. Chris Cuomo, after listening to that clip, goes, then why are you talking? Why are you talking unless you know? That's fair, right? Like, why make a statement like that? Whereas, some people could, law enforcement could say, basically, they would defend themselves and say, look, there's no foul play. This is an ongoing investigation. Okay. What do we want to know? First of all, we want to know everybody's been tight-lipped, except for Shepard, Nolan Wells' friend.
Yeah.
Everybody else, we don't know what anybody's been saying. We have no idea what the accounts are. Are they consistent? Are they conflicting? The young woman that Nolan was apparently talking to, that he left the boat for, what does she have to say? So witness statements matter, okay? How does it also match up to this new data that we got, the GPS data tracking the boat's movements, the dispatch audio? Apparently the boat was taking on water or was having a problem. Do their statements match up to the timeline? That's number one. Number two, the autopsy. Is there any indication of foul play? Is there any indication of trauma to Nolan Wells at all? And again, a body being in the water in that environment could also make it difficult as well. These are the questions that, more than anybody, the family needs to know. The family needs to know what happened to their son. And so those are the things that we're going to be looking for. When we'll get those answers, not entirely clear. Ben Crump said that the results of the independent autopsy were going to come out last week, but then said, no, it's delayed because there was problems with like cancellation of flights. Maybe we'll get the results of the independent autopsy before the state medical examiner autopsy, because I know they're waiting for toxicology results. But those are the things that we have to be looking out for, and seeing what the sheriff has to say about the investigation as well.
I mean, I think you said something there that's really poignant, that this case isn't going anywhere anytime soon, because first and foremost, the family wants and deserves answers. Those closest to him. I mean, we talked about it at the top of our interview, the fact that everyone's saying this guy was so charismatic, he was so fun, he was so great. And for a life to be cut short at 18, we want to know why. What happened? And I guess there's another aspect in all of this too, that I just saw reports that the FBI is investigating. This is according to People. They just put out an article yesterday that there have been death threats to some of the friends or people who were involved. And I know we've talked about it in my episode. You had it on your sidebar episodes, right. The fact that Ashley Cole, one of the judges, came out and spoke about these death threats, whatever. I mean,
because her son was apparently there that day.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, two things happening at once, right? Like, you have Mr. Shepard saying that he and his friends received threats. The FBI, according to outlets like TMZ, have been investigating threats. They wouldn't say who they're directed to, and they wouldn't say what those threats are. So are they the same thing? I don't know. They could be different. But my understanding is, look, two parts about this. And I think also the FBI might be examining some of the digital evidence in this case too, which is good because they have great resources.
Right.
This is a case that has taken on a life of its own. This is a case that has really spurned a lot of conspiracy theories, spurned a lot of opinions. There are people who already have made conclusions, which I think is upsetting to say the least. And I would just say, wait to see what happens. Just wait to see what happens. Don't take matters into your own hands. There's already a lot of eyeballs on this. There's already a lot of, it seems to me you have two separate investigations, the family's independent investigation and law enforcement's investigation. These witnesses are being questioned one way or another. They're going to get to the bottom of it, or hopefully get to the bottom of it one way or another. Just let's take a step back, because the worst thing that's going to happen is if the public gets involved in an improper way. And I'm not saying don't show interest in it. I'm not saying don't put pressure on law enforcement to give you answers. But if you start harassing the different players that are involved, A, that's incredibly wrong. And B, it could potentially contaminate the case and affect the case. Don't do it. Just watch what happens, research, study, follow our coverage of it, but do not directly contact or harass or threaten anyone involved. There's no good that can come from that whatsoever, particularly if at the end of the day, if everybody's on the same page that this was just a tragic accident and that he may have fallen and drowned, although the family does raise very interesting conversations about this, questions about this. If he was a top-tier athlete, knew how to swim well, there's people all out there, how did nobody see anything? These are fair questions.
I mean, I think you're right. You and I both have covered so many cases where social media, takes it and runs. And then there's misinformation that's spread. And to your point, it could damage the integrity of the investigation, which here is of the utmost importance. We just have to be patient, sit back and wait, and hopefully the facts kind of come together, because at the very least, the family deserves all of that.
And this is not attacking people who have built channels or built followings,
right,
following cases. Not at all. But there's a difference between doing that and throwing out things or taking a narrative or an opinion that's not backed up by evidence. I mean, I'll tell you right now, if I wanted Sidebar to triple in views, I could do that. I could have a headline, "This person's responsible," and just show. But
that's unethical.
That's not what we do, and it's very easy to do that on social media.
Honestly, that's why I wanted you on the show, Jesse, because you do such a good job. I mean, we talk in the morning meetings. You are fact-checking every episode. You're going through and making sure we have all of it. So when I look to Sidebar, I'm like, okay, Jesse Weber has it covered. He did all the research. Here are the facts. We're putting it together. So truly, thank you for coming on Scandal and walking us through and giving us your take on this case.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for covering it. You do a great job. Let's see where it goes.
And that's where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.